Many of us have that one chassis or platform that really kind of speaks to us. And for me, that is the Tamiya TAO2 platform, which of course I've mentioned before. This one's a TAO2. This one is a... But many of us, for them, that is the RC10, and for good reason. So I wouldn't say I am a total stan for the RC10, but I did get the RC10 CC. I did get the RC10 40th because I decided I wanted one to actually run. And I felt that was kind of what I needed. But then I actually got the Fan RC Worlds car, and then I did kind of like the idea of maybe having like a stealth transmission, so I did get the team car. So yeah, I guess, but that's it. So I did actually manage to avoid getting the Kinwald and the Masami, but you may be thinking, Rob, I saw the title of this video and my eyes actually work. That is a Kinwald sitting right in front of you. And you're right, this is a Kinwald sitting right in front of me. This was actually given to me to build, not to keep, by my buddy Stuart, who I've mentioned before on the channel. He actually originally came to me and said, hey, can you actually just paint the body for me? But then he said, do you want to just build the whole kit and do it on the channel? I said, absolutely. Now, Stuart is an avid collector and somewhat of a team-associated completionist. So this one is going to be on the shelf, so I don't have any run footage for you today on this one. And this will actually be the beginning of a 4-part series that I decided to do. Obviously, we're starting with the Kinwald here, and then we're going to go ahead and build the Fan RC Worlds car. Then we're going to do kind of a special build of the team car. And then I think the last part of the series is going to be taking my original 6-gear 40th and converting it to a 10 4.1. Obviously, that's going to take some work, so that'll be interesting. So do remember to like and subscribe so you can catch all of those projects coming up. But let's jump into the Kinwald build. Now, first thing I did is I actually carefully peeled the factory sealed stickers off the side here, and it should be noted that you can kind of peel them off cleanly. So if you ever see somebody selling a factory sealed box, just look very closely at that seal, because they may say, hey, it's factory sealed, they can't open it, and you may just end up with a box full of bricks. Once you do open it, it does pull away this kind of like foil void you can see here. So you may want to ask for like a close-up of a picture of the decal, of the sticker or whatever, but just be aware of that. That's all. I won't go into too much detail over the whole build because there are a ton of RC10 build videos out there, and I'm just talking about my channel. So we'll jump right in here. Bag A is most of your front end here, and then you'll also notice that it's sitting on a towel. As I was starting to work on it a little bit, even though this is kind of, you know, a cushioned kind of plastic mat here, I was worried that any dirt or grime on the surface might scratch the actual anodize of the pan. So I did put on that towel and worked on that the rest of the time. I did miss putting in this front stub axle. The image is kind of off to the side a little bit, but so I think I had to disassemble both of the front, you know, steering there to actually put that back in because I missed where that was. Now at this point in all of my builds recently as an adult, I am batting 1,000 on not losing E-clips. And here we have bag B done. I actually am using my stash of associated greases and lubes, so I didn't have to actually open any of the ones that came with the Kinwald kit here. So I have the black grease, I have the stealth lube, and a little later I have the same shock oil that they include in the kit. And you're going to use that black grease to actually build this little thrust washer that is part of your stealth transmission. I assembled the ball diff, no real drama there, just kind of drop all those balls in using that little trick where you kind of dab a little bit of that stealth diff lube on the end of a hex driver and just kind of drop them in. When putting on the spring, they do tell you to compress it first and then put it on. And then when you go to set it, you're actually going to use the end of that threaded part as your reference point, and they suggest having 2.5 millimeters of that threaded part of that shaft exposed when you put on that nut to hold that spring in place. Now, this has been a frustrating reoccurring issue with some of the associated imperial-sized hardware builds that I've done as of late. And for whatever reason, once a build was done, I kept just kind of blanking out of my mind that I needed to go and get a proper 3/16 driver. I have finally gotten that. Here we go. Finally got an MIP1. In fact, I accidentally ordered 2, so I have some new ones in package there that I need to figure out what to do with. When assembling this rear bulkhead, the issue is that where that wing tube mount comes in, it's so tight up against where that ball stud goes in that it was actually hard to fit any nut driver in there because it's so tight between where that ball stud actually sits and that wing tube. So we do have an issue with this kit where some of the instructions and the hardware that's actually included is not in the exact place they say it's going to be, and it's not the exact hardware they said it's going to be. For the cap head screws that you're supposed to use that attach the rear bulkhead to the side of the pan, they do want you to use a 5/8 inch screw, cap head screw. However, in the bag, there is no, for this particular step, there is no 5/8 inch screw. There are 3/4 inch screws, so I did end up using those. I looked all around, couldn't find any 5/8 that were extra or whatever, so I did use a 3/4. Now where they actually go through, they go into kind of the cup for the battery, but it actually doesn't interfere with the battery at all. So you're fine to use those 3/4 cap screws. Another issue where the bag designation in the manual and what's happening in real life not quite lining up was the 4 screws that hold on the stealth transmission on the bottom. They were actually left over from the previous bag once you start getting into this step. By the way, in regards to the stealth transmission, for the 2 or 3 viewers that are under the age of like 35, in the 90s, in the early 90s, everything was stealth because we were obsessed with the stealth fighter and the stealth bomber that were just kind of revealed to us in the late 80s, early 90s. Now, technically, I think the stealth bomber was like 88 or 89 that we found out about it really. And then the stealth fighter we found out in like early mid 1990. And then the stealth transmission came out in the kind of mid to late 90, the year 1990. So that was kind of like fins in the 50s and 60s on cars and everything being the jet age. Everything was stealth in the 90s. It was definitely like a Americana zeitgeist of just stealth everything. Okay, here we have the rear arms mounted. They are mounted in the forwardmost position, giving it the kind of shorter wheelbase here. Getting into assembling the CVAs that are included with the kit, using black grease on the barrel. And then the very, very small grub screw actually locks everything into place. And then you just kind of have this sleeve that slides over it for a little extra added protection. At this point, when I checked the spur gear on the slipper here, I rotated it and I could see that it kind of like wobbled. I actually disassembled this part of the transmission like 2 times and rebuilt it and still got that same wobble every time. So I went on to a couple forums, a couple groups, and asked about it, and kind of the long and short of it was, yeah, it'll do that.
Yeah, they'll do that.
Ooh. Going to skip over showing you doing all the turnbuckles, very boring, but the point is here is that I have all the little notches faced in this particular instant to the left of the chassis. That way, when you go to adjust them, you know that each one is going to be turning the same way and having the same kind of lengthening or shortening. And I'll spare you the full tedium of the damper assembly here, but one thing to note is that these shocks come with the bleeder cap on top.
We got a bleeder!
And then I just used my 30 weight oil that I had on hand here, as I mentioned. Lastly, the gear cover here and back, again, in a different bag than what was said in the manual, along with the motor mount screws and the screws that hold on the gear cover, all in a different bag from what was mentioned in the manual. So don't think you're going crazy like I did. They're just in a different bag. Okay, as you can see, obviously, I did the body as requested in the box art. And it's not just as simple as kind of these blue drips. There are kind of these slight intricacies to it that I was going to try and replicate the best I could. And really what it comes down to is you almost have to make it look bad, even though, you know, I'm pretty practiced at doing bodies. I'm okay at them, I think. But to kind of make something not look great, it takes a little bit of effort. So this is, you know, Brian Kinwald clearly at this point in his career was more interested in winning races than having a good looking livery, because the livery itself is a little sloppy from the original. So it's iconic, but it's not necessarily good. It's basically just 3 colors, right? Black, blue, and white. But here's the tricky part. The line in between the blue and the white for the drips is actually not like painted in, you know, using careful masking and getting a perfect line in there. It's actually just done with a Sharpie, which I would never incorporate a Sharpie into like one of my liveries or one of my bodies that I painted on purpose. But here, that's what we're doing. But I'm getting ahead of myself. So let's back it up a little bit, because we have to first get the body to actually fit the chassis. AE doesn't give you a lot of help here because it has no cut lines on it. You're basically just flying blind on your own. So the long and short of it is I just kind of kept trimming little by little until it actually fit onto the chassis. The first thing I did was I used a body reamer to cut out the tops of where the shock tower was going to be coming through. Even then, it was still pretty low from where they were going to come. And then I almost basically just cut a slit up that side and then just kind of started widening and widening it. I would say when you come up over the top, you are going to get as close as you think as you can, and then just go a little bit further to the top of the body. And you'll see that the wing tube holes are right in the corner here, so you can kind of mark those as some sort of reference point as you start to get it to fit onto the body. I kind of kept doing the back until I got it far enough down where I could mark a spot where that rear body mount was supposed to be. The manual does not have you put a washer underneath that rear body post, but I think you need at least one, because when you do finally get this into place, the back of that body is actually rubbing on the motor mount or the gear cover in back there, unless you have that one body mount spacer. Similarly with the front, I did just kind of keep trimming those clearances for the front nose tubes to fit over. And then the tricky part with this front body mount hole is that it's actually kind of an elongated like oval, because you're actually kind of sliding it this way, not just straight on to that body post. Now I haven't installed a motor on this, so I'm not entirely sure what clearance I'll need on the back here. I basically left it just as a straight line, and Stuart, when he gets it into his collection, if he decides to put a motor in, he can finish trimming that, but I've done enough of it already. Now once I got it to actually sit on the body, I then went through and kind of marked on one side where the bottom of that chassis was hitting on the actual body shell, and then took measurement each corner and then transferred that measurement on the other side, used a flexible ruler to kind of draw straight lines, and then went around with a X-Acto knife and just did my usual kind of bend and snap routine.
So you bend and snap.
So I studied the drip design that's on the box. There's really only kind of 1.5 view that they give you of the car on the box. You have just the side view and then kind of like this slight 3/4 angle to give you some view onto the top of the car. I ended up having to go and research various places, you know, on various forums and whatever, to try and do the best I could to replicate the drips here. The original re-release in 2014 actually included a decal set to go over here, and you can actually get that decal set for the drips themselves off of MCI. Now, I wanted to paint the drips on, and I didn't want to buy the decals, wait for the decals to come, and then just have them and not use them. So I did have to draw these on my own. I first kind of used a blue Sharpie. Once I got the design I wanted, then I went back through with the black on the outside. And yeah, Associated doesn't help you out at all with this either. There's no masks, there's no decals to follow, there's very little photos of box art on the box, so a little difficult. As far as for the blue, I had really wanted to just use 3 Tamiya colors, spray cans, that's it. Kind of thinking that's probably what happened, you know, way back when they weren't, you know, Kinwald probably wasn't using an airbrush or anything like that. But I found that kind of for a display purpose, the PS3 light blue was obviously too light. Even when I backed it with black, it was still too light. The PS4, even when it was backed with like white, I felt was just a little too dark. This Createx, it's called Phthalo Blue. Phthalo means something, apparently. I found that that was just like the perfect balance. It's super vibrant. So if it's sitting on the shelf there, you're not gonna lose that blue color into the black. You can actually really see that defined blue, but it's still nice and dark, if any of that makes any sense. You'll also see that the window masks that are provided in the kit do not line up with the actual mold lines on the body. And that is by design. I was watching the video that Associated put out, and they kind of mentioned offhand that Brian Kinwald did this thing where he made the windows larger. I don't know why, there was no other information given. If you know why, feel free to comment below. Of course, while you're there, please like and subscribe. Again, we have some really cool projects coming up here in this build series, so you're definitely gonna wanna be notified about those. As I mentioned, the outline of the drips are Sharpie, so once I was satisfied with how I had them laid out, turned the body over, took a Sharpie and went around and drew the drip lines. Now at this point, I did decide to do a matte clear, the ep057 from Tamiya, to kind of protect that marker because I wasn't sure how the liquid mask would react with that permanent marker. Because sometimes, especially when it comes to Lexan, permanent things aren't necessarily permanent. But back to the wing, similar steps here. However, I did have to mask both sides of the wing because the way they mold it, the overspray mask ends up being on the part that you need to paint. So you have to take that off and then cover the whole thing in the liquid mask. It also has this little detail where the wing isn't straight across the back and then up. It has like a little curve up to give a little bit of a structure to the side dams here. So little thing that you have to keep an eye out for, little details like that I'm trying to replicate. Okay, and at this point, the body is completely masked, labeled, and then we started with the black, then we did the blue, and then we did the white, and we were done with that part. Same with the wing, same order, and then we took the masking off. I think it looked pretty good for how I wanted it to turn out. As far as the decal goes, the decals are excellent. There's a couple of interesting things about it. First of all, you have a couple of brands that no longer really exist. You have Novak, you have Airtronics, which is what Sanwa used to be called here in the US. I don't know if they still use that nomenclature anywhere else, but that's what Sanwa used to be here. I had an Airtronics radio. And then the other thing is that they have this one decal that says HIP. And on the original Kinwald car, it was actually HPI. Now, of course, HPI is still an existing RC brand. I'm sure the Associated didn't want to reach out to them and ask them to put, their name on their stuff. But if you trim it carefully enough, you can rearrange a little bit and you end up with an exact decal how it was on the original car. I think also this green and blue Easy Cool decal is, I think it may refer to like a sunglass company that they kind of changed the name a little bit for the actual reproduction here. The decal on the side here that goes over kind of this little air inlet here was by far the most difficult decal to put on here. I had to use, the wet method. I had to use a ton of heat. I had to keep kind of going in trimming little by little, cutting little relief marks to get it to lay down flat, but ended up pretty good. You really can't move it any further than I did, but ultimately ended up looking great. With all that done, the final detail that I added was writing "Game Over" on the rear wing. Again, original little detail from Brian Kinwald's car. Highly doubt it has anything to do with Kevin Talbot. And here we have the final car. The body and decals provided by Associated are really top-notch. Do wish they had given you a little bit more help with those drip marks. I'm sure a lot of people want to do the box art of it, so it would have been nice if they had included something along those lines to help you out. This is probably, now I've built, let's see, the RC10T, the RC10cc, and the 40th anniversary ones. I've built 3 so far, and by far this is the best fitting. The pieces are so top quality that I think if you do want to go out and race the Kinwald, it is an excellent platform to go out and actually race in vintage races. And certainly with the right tires in the right condition, it would absolutely be competitive. Well, very cool build, very cool finish. Definitely one of the more challenging things that I've done that ultimately looks bad. I don't know, as it's supposed to though. So thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. We have tons more stuff to talk about and build and do. Some great stuff coming up in the future as well. So thank you again for watching. We'll talk RC again later. Where is that Sharpie? Ah.